And did your interns come?
Tonight?
They're going to come Saturday.
I hope they're going to come Saturday.
Is there something we can do to entice them?
That's
like
it. That's,
get their picture taken with Barbara?
that sounds wonderful.
And so we'll make sure that we have, I know for most of you we have your accurate spelling, and we'll make sure that we're doing certificates of appreciation for you guys as well too. And last thing we want to do is spell your name wrong, so let us know, okay? Any questions? Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
So how close can we come?
You can get much closer, and you can also get pretty far away.
All right, cool. So have a great evening,
You're fine.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're fine there.
Really?
And you're fine even further back. You can still go. We can see you. Fantastic. We can't see your dancing legs, but we can see you.
Okay, right up there. I actually was the speaker at my college graduation, and they had to get me a step stool, and it wasn't right, so the very first thing I did was get up and climb the class.
Oh, man.
So sad.
Thanks, Sherry.
All right, guys.
Bye, Sherry. Thank you. Thanks. Oh, yeah, great. Actually, I'm videoing this, and once it's done, if I can make a copy of it, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
It'll save me a lot of work in my own office.
Absolutely.
So, hello, I'm Susan Collier, and since we're such a small group, can you introduce yourselves?
I'm Maria Lagunas, and I work with Sherry as one of the counselors.
Oh,
I'm Susan Chang, and I work at the Unity Council also. So Keila McDavid, I also work in the homeownership center with Maria and Sherry.
Could you guys over that table look this way so we can get your beautiful faces? Thank you so much.
Michelle Taylor Lagunas, this is my son.
Georgina Aguilar, work on Pasado for Unity Council.
Nayeli Albaran, the senior center, and Las Maravillas.
Smile for the camera, please.
Reba Tyler. Office only does immigration legal services. We do naturalization. We concentrate a lot also on immigrant visas for crime victims and battered spouses. We do also a lot of consultations on other immigration matters. So feel free to ask other questions if we wrap this up and you have other kind of questions. You'll probably do somewhere. Yes. Before we even get started, I want to go through the packet, but the first thing I see in the packet, there's a couple things that I want to be sure that you all know, that the fee, which is going to be on your applicant checklist, where it says second to the bottom, do not forget to send a check. Oh, sorry, yes. Instead of VCIS, they've updated their name. Can you change it to USCIS so that they'll be sure to do it to USCIS? It's the second instruction from the bottom on the salmon list, and it says payable to BCIS. And then the next piece up above that.
What should it go to?
I'm sorry, USCIS.
USCIS.
Yes, it used to be the Bureau of Citizenship and Immigration, and now is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration. And the amount of the money order is no longer $400. Sad to say, it's now $675. Yeah, quite a gigantic increase.
Yeah. Where it says 400, right?
Where it says 400, cross out 400 and write 675. The fee is $595, and then there's $80 for your biometrics, for your fingerprints. And the service did not get better as they promised it would when the fee went up.
That's only made it cost prohibitive. Interesting.
Yeah. So why don't we go through what's in your packet
Can I ask you a
together?
question? Do we still give the grants for people that are low income for the citizenship or not?
Immigration Service no longer gives a waiver of the fee for low-income people. But it could be that that some government agencies sometimes help people pay for that. So what we've got here, I think these are the things that are going out to applicants so that they know what to bring. I think that's what they're doing. And hopefully that means they do come with their addresses. The next thing I have, but I've rearranged mine, is a copy of the citizenship application. You will go through this in unbelievable also a yellow naturalization note-taking guide, which is what I'm going to start with. And then the other things that you have here are, there's a picture of various versions of the resident alien card, also known as the green card, also known as a MICA, also known as a permanent resident card. And the reason that you like to see lots of pictures about this, we'll talk about later, to try to find out when the date that somebody became a permanent resident can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. And then the red flag checklist that Sherry was talking about is blue. When you put it on red, it's illegible. So I'm going to go through this also in somewhat exhaustive detail. You guys won't need to so much because, as Sherry said, in their orientation, the applicants are going to go down these, answer the questions on their own. If they have any yes answers, they're going to get steered to upstairs to talk to a legal expert. And so by the time they come to you, they should not have any outstanding red flags. Okay, and then there's this red form, which is the requirements that will be your cheat sheet if you need it. It's English on one side and Spanish on the other side, but we're going to spend an hour talking about it. So you may not ever want to look at it. And there's a partial list of immigration legal services organizations with us at the top. And in fact, they even included a flyer for us that says that we give honest, low-cost services. And in fact, free services for crime victims. And that we have free consultations in our office. So if somebody has a problem, they can send them to our consultation office. Then there is this Inmigrantes aprenda cómo protegerse a sí mismo y a su familia, which is actually the same. It's an updated version of this one. You can forget the información importante. It's not as good. So this one is only in Spanish.
Green.
The información. Oh, yours is green. Okay, I'm confused. All right.
These guys are
All right. It's aprenda cómo. And we only have it in Spanish because we're racialist and languages. These are the people, Spanish speakers asked us to create this thing. And it's know your rights for people who don't have documentation. Not only know your rights, like what to do if ICE approaches somebody, but yes, you can send your kids to school. Yes, your kids can get Medi-Cal. Yes, you can call the police if you're a victim of crime. So we think that some of those things are just as important as don't answer your door if ICE can call. Okay, so these are things that if anybody has any interest in these at the event, or if you guys want more or anything like that, we're happy to share those with you.
Or if somebody asks you, do I know my rights? You can give them this, correct?
Yes, and in fact, I forgot to bring something really valuable that you are, that we may also want to have at this. I decided to get out of the screen for a moment.
You're still in.
Tough time. Has anybody seen these red cards around that I have in their wallet?
Yeah.
These, I'm sorry, we're talking about naturalization, I'm talking about undocumented people, but ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, cannot force somebody to open their door if they don't have a warrant. And generally, 99.9% of the time, they don't have a warrant, and someone shouldn't open their door. Because the moment they invite them inside, everybody, everything there, they can search everything. They can ask everybody where they were born. They can do all of that. So opening the door is an unwise idea if there's somebody there that doesn't have documents. So this tells them that. And it also has a phone number to call if somebody does get picked up by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And it's a toll-free number that they can call from detention. So they can get at least a consultation with an attorney to find out, oh, should I sign this form and leave the country, or should I stay and fight it, or something like that. So I can bring some of these next Saturday in case you know anybody who might want them. All right. So pretty soon we'll start talking about naturalization. This last thing is the inmigrantes, and we do have this in English, but not here in the packet. Oh, it's not the last thing either. There are, as I alluded to earlier, there are special immigrant visas available for crime victims. And so somebody, a day laborer on San Leandro, who gets robbed and beaten, if he calls the police and if he can help identify who did it, he may be eligible to get legal status through that. So it's a really valuable program, which I am hugely in favor of, because I think that when they can start calling the police, that people will stop victimizing people there, and eventually the community will be safer. So I really want all of you to go out and talk about the U visa. Yes, I do naturalization, but I'm a U evangelist. All right. Yeah, thank you. And then here's a little thing about watching out for scams, because especially every time Congress says anything about immigration, all these notarios get out there and say, oh, come and sign a $500 retainer with us and we'll sign you up. They send in applications sometimes, either that or, it's like almost better if they just scam you out of your money and don't send an application. Because we frequently see people who an application did get sent in, it was denied, the person was put in deportation proceedings. So that's what these flyers are all about, and I'm sure that Sherry probably has sent out the actual flyers. Okay, good. So, is that everything that we said? Oh, I'm sorry. Citizenship classes on the reverse side of the legal immigration agencies. Okay? So let's grab this yellow note-taking guide and start talking about the requirements for naturalization. So they're actually pretty brief because they are on this red sheet. They are 18 years of age, has a green card, has had that green card for 5 years, has good moral character, and can pass a test of English and U.S. history and government, and gives an oath of loyalty to the United States. Okay, thanks, bye. So one of the things that only my organization and the Immigrant Legal Resource Center ever make a point of is you have to have a green card and it has to be good. Usually people go right past that and they see that the person has it and they look to see that they have 5 years. No, it's extremely important to find out that the person got that green card legally, that there was no fraud involved, that there were no mistakes involved, and that they haven't done anything since then to become deportable. Because the naturalization process is where the Immigration Service says, oh, I see. Oh, I see that you were married in 1994. Our other records say that in 1995 you entered the United States as, an unmarried son of a permanent resident. So, actually you were not eligible for that visa, and we are going to cancel your permanent residence. So somebody can get in huge trouble for that. Or they can say, oh, I see you say you were married in 1994, and that, let's see, how's this go? We actually had a client in exactly this situation. But that in 1993, you helped somebody enter the United States. So this person came into the United States, your wife came into the United States in 1993, but she wasn't your wife, right? And you encouraged her to come when she was undocumented. So if she'd been your wife, we might give you a waiver of the ground of removal for alien smuggling. But she wasn't your wife, she was your girlfriend. You're guilty of alien smuggling, and we can put you in deportation proceedings. So that's why we did the red flag checklist. And you guys shouldn't be having to worry about these things, but it's why we make such a big deal of it when we go through this. And in my office, we almost never see anybody with a clean naturalization case. We always see people who either terrible mistake happened and they were denied, or somebody whose citizenship teacher said, I really think you're going to need to go and talk to the International Institute about this because this looks bad and dangerous. Or people who luckily found out to come to us, because a lot of people can make these mistakes. Okay, so that was point number 1A, LPR status still good, but there's more. So here's the different ways that somebody can run into trouble. One is the one that I noticed that I noted earlier that actually doesn't happen infrequently. Somebody's father petitioned for him, and he was not married at the time. His father was a permanent resident. He was a child, actually, but while he was waiting on this incredibly long waiting list to get a visa through that process, He aged out, he turned 21, so we moved into another category where the waiting list is 10 years longer. So during this 10 years, he's got a life. And he gets married, he has children. Unfortunately, as soon as you become married, there is no visa category for a married child of a permanent resident. There's a visa category for a married child of a citizen, but not one for a married child of a permanent resident. The minute a child of a permanent resident gets married, they lose their entire visa application. So obviously they lie. When they come in the country, they say, "Are you married?" You say, "No." Generally, that doesn't get caught until some smart officer is looking at this. And we actually had somebody come in the office with exactly this problem the other day. The problem was actually that her husband had that problem, and he petitioned for her. She went to her interview, and the interviewer was nice enough to say, "Do not go forward with this application, or you will, the husband will be deported. So I recommend it. Go away. Never apply for naturalization." So that's one way. Another is back in the 80s, there was amnesty. And amnesty had two parts. One, you had to be here on January 1st, 1982, and have continuous residence, and that's all been pretty well figured out. There was also something called the Special Agricultural Worker Program, where people could get a letter from employers saying that they had worked in the fields for 90 days during the past couple of years. A lot of those letters were fraudulent. And so that was kind of cool, because amnesty was confidential. So that got sealed. But we see people coming in who didn't get it, who lied, were caught. Then they later were trying to immigrate through their spouse. They're filling out the forms. Have you ever lied to get an immigration benefit? No. They get their green card. So we say, if you lied in this case and then you didn't admit it, actually that's visa fraud. So, sorry, this is kind of a little bit more overwhelming than I wanted to get into. Anyway, so saw fraud, lied on application, things like that. So those are problems that somebody might possibly have. Another thing that somebody can do is that they have a good green card, but then they did something to lose it. And that falls generally into two categories. The first category is they abandoned their U.S. residence. And a lot of people think, oh, the green card. Well, back in the day when I started, they say, okay, it's good for a year. You can travel outside and come back for a year. So go out for 11 months, come back for a month, go out for 11 months, come back for a month. Enough people lost their green cards doing that, that now people say, okay, go out for 5 months, come back for a month, go out for 5 months, come back for a month. Don't let it be more than 6 months. Or the Immigration Service will start to be suspicious that you're not a permanent resident of the United States, you're actually a permanent resident of India, or you're actually a permanent resident of Peru. And so they will actually take away somebody's green card because it says they're a permanent resident. And the standard is that you can only take a temporary trip abroad. Now, temporary could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, it could be for school, so long as there's a temporary reason with a reason that you went and a reason you were coming back and that you're really living in the United States. It's an objective qualification, it's a subjective determination, but you make that subjective determination in front of an immigration judge while you're paying $2,000 to an attorney to make the argument for you. So it's best not to get in that situation. And the gossip in the community is, as long as you come back before a year, or as long as you come back before 6 months, you're fine. And it's not true. The question is, where are you living? And if you're out for 5 months, and you're back for 2 weeks, and you're out for 5 months, and you're back 2 weeks, clearly you're living out and not in. So that's something else that we should be able to find on the red flag checklist. But people won't understand. We get lots of these books, and we just tell them it's best not to apply. Now, there's some reasons that it's okay to be out for that long, so it's a red flag. I want to say about the red flag checklist, a lot of them the attorney will look at and say, yes, you have a red flag, but it's not going to be a problem. So don't worry, it doesn't mean people can't apply. The other reason that somebody might have lost their green card is that they committed an immigration violation or a criminal violation. An immigration violation would include, like I was saying, alien smuggling, which means helping somebody enter the United States without papers. And it makes you think of something about Roswell, but it's not. It's just a human being who doesn't have papers helping them enter the United States. And when I say helping, I mean stay at my house. Or here's $100 to help take you for a smuggler. Or you would really like Oakland at this time of year. So you can really, it's a very scary thing, and immigration does look at it now. For a long time, I used to say that, there's a part on here that says, who's your wife, where does she live, what's her status, who are your kids, where they live, what's their status. And I always said, watch out for that, because they could say, how'd they enter the country? And you'd say, oh yeah, illegally. And where did they come? They came to my house. And then this person could find themselves defending themselves against alien smuggling. But it never happened until like a year ago. And now finally I feel so much better that immigration is doing that, making my warnings all worthwhile as a joke. It's horrible. But they are doing it. And in fact, an officer even said, and this is a pro-immigrant officer, she said, in today's atmosphere, I can't even guarantee that the undocumented person that you list on here is going to be able to, is not at risk from ICE. I'm not worried about that for a long time. I think ICE is blowing hard and puffing itself up temporarily. Anyway, so if you have an undocumented person, when you're going to write this down and they say, because it says here, what's their status? And you say, none. Hopefully that would have already been approved upstairs with the attorneys. And it may not be a problem at all, especially because now that you've got a U.S. citizen spouse who can petition for you, that status should be changing fairly soon. Okay, so so that was the immigration violation of alien smuggling. The others are crimes. So crimes involving moral turpitude, which is fraud, sex, violence, theft, most crimes. Basically DUI and assault and battery. Simple assault, simple battery, and DUI are not crimes involving moral turpitude, and pretty much everything else is. Or it's a drug crime. And drug crimes and crimes involving moral turpitude, if you commit them and you leave the United States and you try to come back, you had to prove all over again that you're admissible to the United States. It's like applying for your green card all over again. And it's a higher standard, and some people won't be able to get over it, especially now that they've committed this crime. So what happens is that they will be referred, when they're trying to enter, the officer at the border will say, okay, you need to go to the immigration service. The person goes to the immigration service, they have a short interview, and if they can't answer questions correctly, then they get a notice to appear in immigration court. And then they have to argue that case in front of an immigration judge. So crimes, not good to travel after a crime.
Can I ask you a question? It's actually something that happened. One of my seniors, she's going to go for the oath of the citizenship, but she got a ticket because she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. So, on the back of the form that she needs to bring,
Yes.
It says something about
Have you cited or detained?
So that means we have to put that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I actually
Because she was like, her children, one of her sons and her husband said, oh no, that's nothing.
that's not what they mean. Right.
And
It's always better to say yes and explain it.
And we already got the ticket. She already paid the ticket and everything.
Good.
Let's play.
Perfect.
And I said,
Yes.
take this.
And the
hopefully,
question is, have you ever been cited, detained? It's very, and people think, oh, drunk in public, that wasn't an arrest. Or they think, so I used to, when I used to do these naturalization workshops a long time ago, I made the volunteers look someone in the eyes. Have you ever been arrested? And you'll notice on the red flag checklist, which I made up, it asks that question 4 different times. So it's lucky you guys don't have to go over it because it's exhausting. I hate asking people. It's like, didn't you already ask that 3 more times? But the reason is, people just don't think that they have to put it down. So it's our job to make sure that they do put it down. Not it's going to hurt her. In fact, it's going to be good. Now, there's some things in immigration we're being too honest. So we were talking to somebody just today where there's a question on the U visa form, and there probably is on this. Are you a drug addict or have you ever abused drugs? And he said, yeah, I smoked a little bottle of ago. So we want to come back and say, yes, the question here is, have you ever abused drugs? And he'll say, I never did. I wasn't emotionally abusive. So he'll say no. But in point of actual fact, abuse is defined as more than one use. So, yeah. You know, and so in some cases, you don't want to be brutally honest because you think, I'm going to be an honest person. I'm going to say, yeah, smoked joints, you know, when I was 15 years old. What's that problem? And that wouldn't be a good answer. Okay? So ask them specifically if they've used it without having to explain exactly how low the standard of abuse is. So prostitution is another crime that can, although you've got a moral turpitude there. And so we're at the end of page 1. We've talked about how you can lose your green card. And you lose it in this procedure because they're looking at all of your files. And you have to submit your fingerprints. So even if we've had people frequently get denied because they answered no on the 400, they answered no in their interview, the fingerprints come through, and there was a yes in there. So so they're not denied because maybe the crime wasn't that significant. They're denied for lying. So let's go on. That would be in the good moral character section. Okay, so the second thing, now that it's 7 o'clock, we're on page 2. Somebody has to have continuous residence as a permanent resident in the United States for 5 years. So we already talked about abandonment of residence, which is a subjective point of view. Where are you living? Now, this is something that is, a continuous residence is an objective analysis having solely to do with how many days somebody's out of the United States. They don't care why you were out. They just want to know whether your residence in the United States was continuous. The consequence of not having continuous residence is you have to wait 5 years after, you have to wait actually 4 years and a day after you got back to be able to apply, which is not so bad, actually. It's not like baby boom. But what it means is that someone has been out for a year and they may have even had an excuse for being out. Maybe they were out visiting a parent, the parent died, they had to arrange for the funeral, or they became sick. There are a lot of good reasons for staying out of the country too long, which don't involve abandoning somebody's residence in the United States. Basically, there was some kind of emergency circumstance. They still had to be in the United States continuously for 4 years and a day. But when I don't mean be in, I mean reside in the United States for 4 years and a day. Reside means your home is here, this is where you're coming back to. It doesn't mean you can't go out for a month or two. You don't have to physically be in the United States for all that time, but this has to be your home. No one takes very short trips during that time. Yes, I realize this is kind of like absurdly arcane. But I'm proud that I know it, so I have to share. So this goes into a lot of detail about that. But mostly what I worry about when I see the long absences is your green card still good? So continuous residence isn't even such an issue. The exception to the 5-year residence, let's take a quick look at all those green cards. It's on a white piece of paper, I think. Is it? Tell me. Where did mine go? It's on a buff piece of paper. Yeah. All right. So someone has done a very nice job of making little pointers and arrows on this. So let's look at the one with the Q&A. This is actually this is the current permanent resident card. So somebody who's gotten their residence within the last 10 years will have this. So their alien number, which you are also going to have to put at the top of every single page of the N400 form, is where they point to there. Does everybody see A number? And it starts with A, and then it has 9 numbers. And so that's what you're going to write everywhere. And then the date that they became a permanent resident is actually very nicely written forward. It goes month, month, day, day, year, 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 which is sane. But there are a lot where it's flipped around backward. For example, the second one down, the resident alien card, if you look on the far side, so the front of it is here and the back of it is next to it, the resident alien date is in this like block of numbers here, and it's written backward. It says, this is March 4th, 1980, so it is 03 is the month, 04 is the day. So this has the day and then the month and then the year. So, and here's a really good one. The one next below that has WAS, it's got it says 910712. This person became a resident on July 12, 1991. So good luck with that. A lot of people know already when they became a permanent resident. But I'm sure that there will be people interspersed around. And you guys already know how to do this, right? Because you did it last year. So you'll be the experts on finding the date of permanent residence. So that's a challenge. All right. The exception to that 5 years, there's 3 exceptions. One is I did a Univision fair a while ago where the people weren't trained. I hope nobody was there doing this volunteer. But the ones I checked over, everyone who was married wrote, I want to do this after 3 years because I'm married. Somebody who has been a permanent resident who's been married to a U.S. citizen for 3 years and is still living with that U.S. citizen and has lived with them for that entire 3 years, and the U.S. citizen has been a U.S. citizen for 3 years, they can naturalize after 3 years instead of after 5 years as a permanent resident. So that's nice. Usually, mostly people want to do it if they want to immediately immigrate a relative or something like that. So it's a nice little benefit for spouses of U.S. citizens. The problem is that unless you guys know which one to mark, if the person doesn't have that 333, then you really want to make sure that they go with the 5. And don't mark on the form B, mark A. Go with the 5 years, not the 3. Even if they're married, especially if it's been 5 years, if the person has been a permanent resident for 5 years, you mark A, not B, even if they are married to a U.S. citizen. Because it just confuses the immigration service unfairly and slows the whole process down. Okay, so generally everyone is going to be A. And I wouldn't have known until I went to this one event where people were marking every different which one. All right, so I'm only just digressing onto the form itself for a moment there. Another exception is somebody who enters the United States as a refugee only has to have 4 years as a permanent resident until they can naturalize. Somebody who gets asylum based on the same standard, a well-founded fear of persecution based on, can you help me, race, nationality, ethnicity, religion, political opinion. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think it's the first time I've ever gotten all 5. They can do it 4 years after they become, 5 years after they're awarded their asylum. Bless you. 4 years, basically it's 4 years if you're already from your German asylum. All right. 4 years from the application for permanent residence was granted. All right. So we're on page 3 already. The other residence requirements is that somebody has to live in this district, which is the San Francisco district, or state, where they file their application for at least 3 months before they submit their application. And also, somebody can submit their application to USCIS 4 years and 9 months after they became a permanent resident, so they can do it a little early. And we had a lot of that last year when the fees were going to go up. People were trying to get it in at the last possible moment. They also have to be continuously resident between having their application approved and when they get sworn in as U.S. citizens. So what you were seeing is that on their oath notice, it asks a lot of the same questions, like a shorter version of all the harsh questions. Have you ever been arrested? Have you left the country? Have you, I can't remember what some of the other things are. Have you gotten married or divorced or anything like that? Because they just want to be sure you're still eligible, that you haven't done anything to become ineligible. You'd be shocked how many people get DUIs, like on the way home from the naturalization interview. Yeah, it's awful. They also have to have physical presence. Remember when I was talking about continuous residence? They actually have to have their feet on U.S. soil for half of the 5-year period. All right. So the next category is good moral character. Good moral character is analyzed by 4 different categories. The first is that there is a list, and it's here in Section 101F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, that lists all these things, which, if somebody has done them within a 5-year period preceding their application, they're barred from being able to naturalize. So they would have to wait for 5 years. Those things are drug offenses, with the exception of single conviction, simple possession of less than 30 grams of marijuana. Does anybody know how much 30 grams of marijuana is? Well, as it turns out, 28 grams, 28.5 grams is an ounce. So 30 grams is not like somebody's just carrying around a little tiny bit. They're carrying an ounce. All right. So it would only be a very insignificant drug offense, is what I'm saying. All right. A crime involving moral turpitude. When I was talking earlier about things that can get you deported or kept out of the United States, basically all crimes. Being a suspected drug trafficker, you don't even have to have a conviction for that, but that the Immigration Service thinks you're a drug trafficker, that they even have secret evidence that somebody's a drug trafficker, can bar someone from naturalization for this 5-year period. If they have 2 or more jail sentences of 5 years or more, or served 180 days or more in jail as a result of 1 or more convictions, if they have committed visa fraud, which means lying to get into the country, lying to get an immigration benefit, lying in your naturalization application, lying to get your green card, then you're also barred for 5 years. You might also have your green card taken away, but you're also barred for 5 years from showing good moral character. Prostitution, illegal gambling, or other commercialized vice. Alien smuggling, unless it was the first offense for smuggling an immediate relative. And as I said earlier, alien smuggling means bringing a human being without papers into the United States or encouraging them to come into the United States, aiding or abetting them.
How they can prove that?
That's an excellent question. But like I say, when you have an undocumented spouse or undocumented children, they'll ask. And you just can't believe what people say when they get asked by an officer. They just say it. Because a lot of people, I was just saying a little while ago, it's always best to be as honest as possible. Not always. I mean, definitely. In that situation, you'll say, you know, actually, I did help my brother-in-law because he was in terrible straits. He was ill. He needed a doctor. He had insurance. Whatever. The most wonderful reason in the world, but you're still alien smuggling, and it wasn't an immediate relative, so you're deported. And can't show good moral character. But how will they know? Because you tell them.
So what about when they want to become a citizen, but then the person is married and the wife or the husband, they're illegal.
Mm-hmm.
When they fill out the application,
Yeah.
they have to.
They do. They have to come forward. And notwithstanding what this one officer said, just showing the Immigration Service that somebody doesn't have documents has never, ever resulted in immigration coming after that person. Mostly because, like if it's a family visa petition, obviously that person is being petitioned for, so there's not a lot of administrative intelligence in going after that person because they're going to get their papers soon anyway. So I think that's sort of the standard. Although, to digress for just a moment, the problem with having an undocumented spouse of a U.S. citizen is not the problem for the U.S. citizen. Everyone thinks when you're married to a U.S. citizen that you get your papers, and you know that's not the case. If somebody entered the United States without papers, they can't do their paperwork in the United States, even if they're married to a U.S. citizen. They have to leave. And if they have more than a year without papers in the United States, they have to stay out for 10 years. It's called a 10-year bar. And so that is a draconian measure that keeps, so we have people, this is the most common thing. And when you see on phone banking, I'm married to a U.S. citizen. And this is somebody who has been in the United States since she was 2. She's married her longtime boyfriend. He's a U.S. citizen. He was born here. And they have this 10-year bar. There's a waiver available of the 10-year bar, but you're already outside of the United States when it's being adjudicated. So if it's denied, and there's almost no review of decisions that are made by consular officials, you're stuck outside for 10 years. If you try to come back in illegally, then you have a permanent bar to being able to immigrate. So it's extremely harsh, and there are so many families that are living on the border because the U.S. citizen, spouse, and child have had to move there in order to be able to see the spouse who's stuck outside. Or they're just stuck in the United States with the undocumented spouse never being able to adjust her status. So hopefully all these people are going to vote. And I got to say, I think even if McCain wins, we're going to have immigration. because you can't get any worse than it is right now. So that's the problem with having an undocumented spouse. Normally you would say, not so, who cares? It's a U.S. citizen, obviously he's going to petition for her, but not in that particular circumstance. With children, if you have undocumented children, unlawful presence doesn't accrue under age 18. So if the person becomes a citizen and petitions for his undocumented children who are here, although why you have undocumented children if you're a permanent resident, I'm not really sure how that came about, but it does sometimes happen. Then they can do consular processing, and they don't have the 10-year bar because they didn't accrue any unlawful presence because they were children. Should I keep going on this? So, however, if they come back to the U.S. without inspection, the permanent bar does get them, even though they didn't officially accrue unlawful presence. I don't know what. For these purposes, the permanent bar does kick in, but the 10-year bar doesn't. In case you guys want to become immigration lawyers. Before you came in, now you don't. All right, so that was the statutory bars to showing to good moral character. Okay, that's the thing you can't overcome. The next set of things that can come out and get you are discretionary factors, and they are on page 4. The discretionary factors, the good thing about them is that you can weigh good things about them. So if you're a good parent, if you're a regular churchgoer, if you help your family, then you can make immigration say, okay, this negative thing happened, but look at all these positive things. And they're required to weigh the positive and the negative. With the statutory bars, you can be a saint, and they will deny your application. So the negative factors are any of those things that we just saw in INA 101F that happened longer than 5 years ago. Those can still be counted against you in the Immigration Service's discretion. Also, multiple petty convictions that don't quite rise to that level. Failure to pay taxes is one. Failure to register for the draft, the selective service for men. If the Immigration Service believes that that failure to register for the selective service was knowing, which they presume that it was knowing these days. Failure to support children, so somebody who's behind on child support payments is going to have a tough time. Fraudulent receipt of public benefits, which is also a crime, so it's not a good idea to go tell the Immigration Service that you're fraudulently receiving public benefits. And in fact, one of the things on the red flag checklist that won't come up so much with this population, there are people who come in as refugees and they can get supplemental security income. They're eligible as refugees, and then they become citizens and are able to maintain it. If you travel out of the United States while on SSI, you have to inform the Social Services, the Social Security Administration, if you're going to be gone out for longer than 30 days. So a lot of people don't. So the Immigration Service used to say, okay, go back to SSA, because they'll say, oh, I see you have an absence here of 60 days, and you're on SSI. Go back and get a letter saying they knew about that. Of course, they didn't know about that. So you have an overpayment. Now, immigration probably will just ignore it and let it go, but technically you've committed a crime of overpayment of your SSI. So, but don't worry, because the red flags checklist will screen out all these things, and you don't have to worry about it when you get to where you are. So also someone cannot naturalize if they are on probation or parole. They have to get off first. And it's a discretionary factor if you were on probation or parole within the last 5 years. But if you somehow, like if somebody had a DUI, that's not a bar to showing good moral character. But if you're on probation for it, at the time of your interview, you'll be denied. So that's something we also have to watch out for. So the next category of things that can get somebody on good moral character, there are certain temporary bars, like I just said, probation or parole. If somebody is under a current deportation order, they can't naturalize. Or if they advocated totalitarianism or anarchism within the last 10 years, or were voluntary members of the Communist Party within the last 10 years. And the thing is, this used to be huge before 1989. And the Immigration Service took it extremely seriously, and they still do with Cubans. They're going to like root out those Cubans and keep them from becoming U.S. citizens. So what people had to do was say they weren't voluntary members of the Communist And then there are permanent bars, as one could imagine. A conviction for murder permanently bars you from being a U.S. citizen, and yes, that's a rule. Or a conviction of an aggravated felony after 1990, which is really serious felonies. So then you can never become a U.S. citizen. Also, military deserters, draft evaders, and, this is arcane, if someone applied for and received an exemption from the military because they were an alien, they said, I shouldn't have to serve because I'm an alien, they can never become a U.S. citizen, which I don't think it's all that common. Okay, also somebody has to be 18, and everybody you'll be saying is 18. And if we want to go into all the different ways that somebody 18 and under can become a citizen, we can talk about that later. So then they also have to pass a fairly simple test of English. Are you guys doing these applications in English?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's probably the best way to find out whether somebody can pass the test in English. What happens is they get asked questions about the N400 in English, and then they're also asked the questions about U.S. history and government, also in English. Now, actually, I'll jump ahead to the U.S. history and government. The standard is going to change on October 1st for the test on U.S. history and government. They tried to make it more interactive than it was in the past. In the past, you just had a list of 100 questions that you memorized up until you gave the answers on your citizenship exam, and then you forgot them. The Immigration Service wants people to engage a little more. Sometimes there's several different things you can answer. You can discuss the topic. It actually seems like it might be better for the more empowered and better educated applicants. Not as good for people who are really having a tough time learning English and who nevertheless want to become U.S. citizens. But October 1st is the day that if your application is in before October 1st, you get to opt to take the old test. Or you can opt to take the new test. After October 1st, you're stuck with a new test. So it's basically the same topics, it's just a more discursive way of having to respond to questions about it. And those will all be in English. And so you'll need to discuss a topic like the relationship between Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King in English. So that'll be a challenge. And also you have to write 2 sentences that are dictated by the examiner, and it's usually fairly simple, and they've posted 25 potential questions on the internet. It's things like, I drive a car, it's a sunny day today. And if somebody just really does a good job of it, I mean, if somebody does a 90% job, they'll be fine. Similarly with the questions, if they have 10 questions they're supposed to answer, if they answer 6 or more correctly, they're going to be able to pass that test. But people seize up when they go into their interviews, and so it's an incredibly, that's part of the challenge, is that people freak out when they're in front of an examiner. Some of the examiners are incredibly nice. I had one that asked this man, how many stars are on the flag? And he said, U.S. flag, 13 stripes. And she said, no, how many stars? And so she got up, walked across the room, went to her flag, outlined the stars with her finger and said, stars, how many? Yes. So that, which is what, because he was in there, he was really making an effort. He knew what the flag was, he had the basic concept down. So that was pretty gratifying to see. So there are exceptions of the English requirement, and you guys may be identifying these and need to note probably just the people who speak 2 languages. Spanish probably being the most common, but probably some other languages. If someone is 50 years old and has been a permanent resident for 20 years, or 55 years old and been a permanent resident for at least 15 years, and that doesn't mean lived here, but has been a permanent resident for 15 years, then you write across the top, interpreter requested, 50-20 or 55-15. And there's also a place in here where you can specifically say, I want an exemption for this reason. And we'll do that, we'll talk about it more when we go through the whole application. So those people can take the test in their native language. Woo-hoo! They still have to go to their interview, they still have to study their naturalization application, but they can do it in their native language. Also, if somebody has a severe mental incapacity or disability, or a developmental disability, they can get a doctor to fill out an incredibly complex form in shocking levels of detail while jumping through a burning hoop backwards. That if they do that, if a doctor can do that for somebody, chances are 50-50 that they can take their test in their native language. Or not have to do the history of government questions at all. It's shockingly difficult. And what's really, really difficult is trying to explain that to a doctor. It sounds like you've had some experience with it. Okay, pass a test on U.S. history and government. We'll hear it about page 5, and we talked about that. And then there's special questions for people who are 65 years old and have been a permanent resident for 20 years. They can do it in their own language because they're 55-15 or 50-20. They also only have to study 25 questions. Okay, we already talked about the disability exception, and we don't need to go into it much more. If the applicant fails any part of this, they're automatically rescheduled for a new interview between 3 and 4 months, so they can go and study some more. Then they pass, which is nice. They get a little notice saying that they passed. Usually the examiner gives them a passport application, which is very nice. You don't really even know you've passed until they have you sign your name on the front of your... Has anybody found citizenship? Yeah. Did you have to write your name on your picture?
Yes.
Yes. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, 2 pictures. So you like right across the front of your picture, which is a little counterintuitive. And they have to erase it so that your pen, yes. So that's how you know you passed. They don't ever like give you fanfare or anything like that. You just know when you're signing your pictures that you passed your interview. And then they give you this passport application, and then either right on the spot or while you're waiting outside, or they mail to you your oath. Which happened with you for your oath ceremony? They mailed it to you.
No, sorry. They do give you the certificate.
Yeah, I mean, like, when did you know when your oath ceremony was going to be?
Oh, they know.
Oh, yeah, they did. And you did it in Masonic Color Spring?
In San Francisco?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you go in, there are about 1,000 new citizens with you.
About that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And they lock the doors.
They put you downstairs.
And you give up your green card, and like you give it up. And they haven't given you your naturalization certificate yet, but they want your green card first because they don't want you to have both. Yeah, but it's nice. There's nice features. And you have to say, I give up all allegiance to any foreign prince and potentate. And what's interesting is you say, I give up all loyalty to any other country. And of course you don't. And you know, they know that you don't. You'd be a fool to give up your loyalty to your home country. So you had to say, no. No, in fact, U.S. law permits dual citizenship. It's the only problem with having citizenship in 2 countries is what your home country says you can do. And for a long time, Mexico said you couldn't do it, and now it's got like conditional, you can get your Mexican citizenship back even after you're U.S. citizen. Where are you from?
Guatemala. They don't allow it.
They don't. So you had to give up your Guatemalan citizenship. But the U.S. would have allowed it. So it's funny that you're swearing to give up your loyalty to another country while knowing that you're going to maintain your citizenship. But see, you are able to do that totally honestly. Okay, the process is first you determine that somebody doesn't have any red flag checklist, that have red flags. Then you determine that they're eligible, that they've been a resident for 5 years, yada, 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 yada. Good, yeah, everything right. So then you fill out this form, which we're about to do. Shall we take a break? Because I think that's a good time. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll talk about the form. Okay? Is 10 minutes? Okay.
Carol, we have a number?
Huh?
Yeah, we have a
What?
Lunch. Good, thank you. Okay, we got the M200 form. Let us start with the top, which says, please print clearly or type your answers using capital letters. Now, many applications have been submitted without capital letters, and they have been accepted. But why tempt fate? And also, it has to be in black ink. So if you're tempted to use a blue pen or use non-capital letters, get rid of that temptation before you start. Okay, good. All right. So you'll notice that it says write your USCIS A number here, and we found the A number on that, on all those forms, and everybody knows their A number. A, 9 numbers. So you have to write that here and here, and here, and here, and here. And so the top of every single page. Now, these people that you're helping aren't incompetent, and it can be that they can do that while you're doing something else, like while you're going over the red flag checklist or something like that. Naturalization, I like naturalization fairs because it's the way the community can pay back. But naturalization applicants are generally totally competent to do all this on their own, and they just kind of need you to guide them along and maybe write faster. But I think the degree to which you can let them do as much as they can is a good thing. So the family name, oh, I'm sorry, A, your current legal name. It's the family name. So if it's Fernandez Garcia, whatever, basically you want to write here whatever's on their green card. Even though in B, it says your name is exactly as it appears on your permanent residence card, you basically want the same thing to be here unless there's some gross difference between the name that they use and the name that's on the permanent residence card. This is what they go and look for their file with, so you want to give them something simple. But it's generally going to be a hyphenated last name for most Latin American families. And then the first name, and then the full middle name, not just the initial. A lot of people don't have that. That's okay. And then the name exactly as it appears on the permanent resident card, so if there are mistakes and things like that, go ahead and do that. So, and if you've ever used other names like maiden name, nicknames, aliases, they go here. And then D is a big tease. It says, do you want to change your name? Because in some districts, the naturalization process is administered by the federal courts, and it's through the federal courts that you can change your name. And so you can do it through the naturalization process, but not any longer in California. So no longer is the San Francisco office one in which you can do that. So if they do want to change their name, they can say they want to change their name, but too bad they don't get to. They still have to go to Superior Court here if they want to do that. So Part 2, information about your eligibility. Remember, it's A, unless there's a unless really the person has been married to a U.S. citizen for 3 years, they're still living together, and when they go to their interview, they have to take a stack of documents this thick to show that they have a good marriage. So it's...
Again, repeat that. Where are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, the gray Part 2?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I'm at least 18 years old, and A, I have been a permanent resident for at least 5 years. All right. Flipping along to page 2, Part 3, information about you. Don't forget the USCIS number. So the person should have their Social Security number, and they'll have their Social Security card, and their date of birth. These are pretty easy. The date you became a permanent resident. Remember how we found that on those cards? And hopefully somebody can help you find it. The country of birth and country of nationality, generally it's the same, but sometimes it's a little bit different. Soviet Union, like former, anyway. So are either of your parents U.S. citizens? Most people are going to say no. If the answer is yes, immigration will totally process this. They'll call somebody into their interview and you say, oh, you did the wrong form. You should have done the N-600 because you're already a U.S. citizen. So just, if the parents are U.S. citizens, have them go and see the attorney. It's not a bad thing. It's just a complex thing. Okay, what is your current marital status? Single, married, divorced, widowed, marriage annulled, or other? Explain. Okay. Are you requesting a waiver? Okay, so that's biographic. Are you requesting a waiver for the English and U.S. history and government test, which means your doctor currently has singed hair from jumping through the hoop? So most people are going to say no here, especially people who are coming and seeing you. If they can come and sit down with you and fill out this form, they're not eligible for this waiver. Are you requesting an accommodation to the naturalization process? Now this might actually happen. If somebody is super shy or hard of hearing or they're slow in responding, you can say, yes, I need a nice examiner. I need someone who's patient and has very clear diction or something like that. That's a perfectly good thing to ask for as an accommodation. I'm in a wheelchair and I need to have wheelchair accommodation. And then the next one is, are you requesting an accommodation? And then you have to say what the accommodation is and why you need it. Most people you'll be saying won't have that. Okay. Part 4, your current address and telephone number. You don't have to do the care of. if they have their own address, then they don't have somebody that they generally do it in care of. So it's the home address, city and county. That's not country, it's county. And then also there's country. So it's city, county, state, zip code, country. Obviously it's going to be the U.S. And care of, you don't have to fill out if there's not a care of, and you don't have to fill out that part of the city. But you do jump down to C and have their daytime phone number, their evening phone number, and for all of your electronically sophisticated people, their email addresses. They shouldn't feel that they're obligated to have an email address. Most people don't. So then, we're whipping along, woohoo, to page 3, part 5. The categories below are from the FBI, so this is part of the FBI check. So, gender, that's easy. Height, that's easy, but they're going to lie a little bit. And weight, they're all going to lie a lot. And I don't think that's visa fraud. That's not an immigration benefit. And then, once we get into race and ethnicity, it gets very, very weird. So, immigration, you know that being Hispanic or Latino is not a race? Yeah, okay. Is it an ethnicity? It's a nationality. Yeah, okay. So, they did ask, are you Hispanic or Latino? And that's nice. You get to say yes or no. But then you still have to choose what race you are. And somebody can choose whatever they want. They're not going to be deported for saying that they tend more toward white than toward black. The only problem is most people are mestizo and they would like to acknowledge that somehow, and there isn't a mixed race here. And the only way that you can sort of say native blood, which would be some of the mixture, you'd have to say American Indian, but that's not what it is. So it's white. Sorry. And then hair color is pretty good, but don't mark blonde if really it's sandy, okay? And then here's the really good one. Eye colors, brown, blue, green, hazel gray, but pink, maroon, and other. So, well, yeah, like for an albino, but why maroon?
Yeah, why maroon?
Right. Okay. Because somebody was paid a lot of money to put a lot of boxes on you. They were paid by box.
And other.
And other, yeah, right. So, information about your residence and employment. Now, here's the really tricky thing. You've already put the information about your residence here, right? So they've done this nice little thing, and on the top line, they have said, same as Part 4A. So you don't have to put their current address here. You just have to say when they moved in, okay? And it's only for the last 5 years. So if they've lived there for 5 years, that's all you have to put. But then, if they lived someplace before, you put them in reverse chronological order. The most recent one on top. So wherever they lived before this house, you put on the top line. And the one before that, okay, got that? You're very smart. All right. B, what are your employers? And then they give almost no room whatsoever. So it's also if you're a student. So it's your employer name. You'll have to use 2 lines basically here. And remember, capital letters. So it's going to be, Oakland Unified School District. And then the employer school address, whatever, 2nd Street, Oakland, California. Knows it. However, a lot of people don't know the street address of their workplace, so just put the street name. And when in doubt, just say the city. I've never seen one rejected for not having something super accurate here. They should take the actual address to their interview, but I don't think their application will get rejected as a result. And then when they started the job, when they ended the job, and what their occupation is. Student, welder, waiter, assembler, janitor. Law school professor. Now, not everybody has a standard job. A lot of people are retired. A lot of people are homemakers. A lot of people are students. A lot of people are unemployed. And it's okay to say unemployed. Because there is no requirement that you be employed to become a U.S. citizen. And in fact, back in the early 90s, the Immigration Service was denying people who received public benefits. They were denying their naturalization. And we pushed back, and we won. So you can be on public benefits. They may ask. Oh, in fact, they always do. It's like, you're not learning how you support yourself. All you have to do is answer the question, I get welfare. They can't stop you from being. Yes. So it's not a problem, really. You just don't feel bad about it going in there and saying that. In fact, if somebody is on public benefits, there's actually a memo from the Immigration Service saying not a problem. Okay, so whipping along to, does anybody have questions so far?
Susan, I think we might have to pause in about 10 minutes to change out the battery.
Cool, great, thank you. Okay, Part 7, time outside the United States. This is where we find whether somebody has abandoned their residence, okay? And it's also, as Sherry was saying earlier, this is the stickiest part, because if people have forgotten when they left and when they came back, you're going to be sitting there for a half hour saying, oh, well, was it anybody's birthday, and was so-and-so in school yet, and, you know, was it Christmas, and things like that. So I will say, you are supposed to say all of the absence. Here's another trick. Okay, sorry. A, how many total trips outside the United States in the last 5 years? Okay, 3. How many total days? So you're going to have to total up the days just for the last 5 years. But the trick is that C says, how many times have you been outside the United States, and for how long since you got your green card? So the first 2 are just for the last 5 years. The third one, where you list them all, is everything since somebody got their green card. So that could be 20 years. And that person has to remember back 20 years for all these absences. Yes, that's a real pain in the neck. So what you'll do, so somebody has 4 absences in the last 5 years, you total up the number of days. They were like gone from December 18th to January 4th, 1 year, December 24th to January 18th. These are the most common ones.
For my seniors who are never going to remember that, what?
Some people have passports, and so I will get to that in just a second. I'm talking about that really easy case where somebody has all this written down. Then you add up the number of days. Okay. So we're now answering the question,
Telltale kid.
what if somebody's really old and they can't remember everything? What if somebody's really young and they can't remember everything? So great if it's in the passport. So this is when the first step is you try to brainstorm with them when they might have gone. Was it Christmas time? Was it Easter? Whose birthday was it? And basically, you know, that sort of thing. And you will have to do this. So just be creative with the person. So if that doesn't work, or I had somebody who, she'd been a permanent resident for 25 years, and she said, you know, my family left, you know, we vacationed for Mexico for 3 weeks every summer. So I wrote vacation in Mexico for 3 weeks every summer between 1975 and 1995. And that was accepted. But that is the fallback. You want to try. And the other thing you can do is you can write approximately,
Okay.
or about, or tilde, you know, which kind of means about. You're allowed to do that, but you want to give it the old college try to be as accurate as possible. This isn't going to get anybody deported. This is just to help the Immigration Service. And the more you help them, the less cranky they will be when they're adjudicating the application. The reason they want to know this is to see if you abandon your residence. So if it's, you know, so it's not rocket science, but you want to be as accurate as you can just to keep the decision maker happy. Okay, is that all right? And then you just might have to like call somebody over for help who's done this before. Okay. So, and then you might actually be one of the lucky people who gets somebody who has more than all of these, and you have to go with all these things. If there's something that doesn't fit here, you have to fill out your own separate piece of paper, and at the top you write the person's name and a number, and then you say additional information, question, part 7, question A, or question C, absences. And then you fill it out inside. You don't need a box. Just give them this information as neatly as possible. So that is what you would do there. So part 8 is information about your marital history. And this always confuses me. Okay, how many times have you been married, including in old marriages? So 0, 1, 2, 6. If you've never been married, you don't have to fill this out. But, okay, if you are now married, you give your current spouse's information all right here in B. All right, so what happens if, okay, and then we're still on your current spouse. Is your spouse a U.S. citizen? No. Does your spouse have an A number? No, your spouse is undocumented. But unless you smuggled him or her, not a problem. if your spouse is a U.S. citizen, give this information, date your spouse became a U.S. citizen, but then it says, if they're not a U.S. citizen, give the following information. Their country of citizenship, Guatemala. Their A number, if applicable. And it's kind of nice that they say if applicable, because they're presuming that some people that won't apply to, they won't have an A number. We used to have people write in none, but you really can just leave it blank.
How are people dealing with domestic partnerships?
It's not, unfortunately.
They can't get it through marriage, but they
right.
still...
Right. They are not married for these purposes. And still, even though gay marriage is now legal in a number of states, including California, it's not recognized by immigration law. Okay.
But you still put all this information down as...
No, it's only if you're legally married. I mean, it's only, no, you wouldn't. It's only if it's an immigration marriage. Which,
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
You wouldn't if it's a gay marriage. I have a feeling that a lot of people will,
Yeah.
just to try to push the law. You do have the political views. Okay, if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, give the following information. And some people feel really anxious about it. Spouse's immigration status, lawful permanent resident. So you're going to say other, none. You know, and it's not the end of the world. But people feel anxious about it. So they'll probably want to talk to an attorney, and the attorney will say, don't worry about it, just write it. Okay, and now we start talking about prior marriages. If you were married before, provide the following information about your prior spouse. And unfortunately, this sticks people too, because they had to have the date of their prior spouse's divorce, you know, the divorce with that person's birthday, I think. No, thank goodness. But their name and the date of marriage and the date the marriage ended and how it ended. And then you have to have the same information for your current spouse's former spouses. Isn't that a pain in the neck? Sometimes people really get bogged down with this stuff. And it's the same stuff. The date of marriage and the date marriage ended, and for some really old folks, they have no idea. It happened 40 years ago. So sometimes, you know, I send them. So I don't know if this is what you guys are going to do. We like have little yellow Post-it notes, and we put the to-do that I have a to-do list that people should do when they go home, or I write it on a little Post-it note what they have to still get.
Do they take this with them?
I don't know what the system is that you guys are setting up, whether you're mailing
The
them.
application? Yeah, they take their application home, but
And then we have to help them.
after we help them, after the applications have been reviewed by a lawyer, when they're getting their picture taken, we're going to be making photocopies of the applications. So we're going to hold on to a copy. We're going to give them a second copy for their records and then the original. So they're responsible for filling out whatever might be missing and mailing it out themselves.
Good, cool. So that's very nice. And if they didn't have enough information to even, so the attorney looked over it and said, no, this is not ready to go yet, you can refer them to our drop-in clinics. So that was that challenge of having to go back and get more information that you're talking about. And also you'd have to do separate, so if you or your spouse had more than one prior marriage, you had to do these additional sheets. My name, my A number, what's the question I'm answering, and here's the additional information. Okay. Part 9, they allow you to have a lot more children than spouses. So, although I will say that when my husband signed up for our marriage license, they wrote number of this marriage, and he wrote 001. So they want to know how many children. Now, what's a child? A child is any offspring of any kind. So it's deceased children, legitimate children.
Wow.
And this is a really painful thing when you're talking to people about deceased children. Legitimate and illegitimate children and stepchildren. Again, nobody's going to get deported because of it, but it can be very good in the future if you want to petition for somebody, or it can be bad if you want to petition for somebody and you forgot to include them on here because you didn't. Oh, people never want to put kids who are out of the country, you know, or kids that you abandoned and things like that. But go ahead and put them there, because now that you're a citizen, you may want to incorporate them into your family. So yes, this is, people will never understand why they have to give information about their deceased child. U visas. If you guys want to help with U visas, let me tell you the trauma of doing U visas. People have deceased children. Okay, so now we're getting into all the questions that are also the red flags. And so I'm not even going to go into them all that much because we've kind of already gone through them, but they're all the ones like, oh, the first one, have you ever claimed to be a U.S. citizen in writing or in any other way? There is nothing worse for immigration than claiming that you are a U.S. citizen. I swear to God, I think you can get off for murder more quickly than you can get for a U.S. citizen. In fact, there's one of these families living at the border where she, you know, the U.S. citizen wife, 3 U.S. citizen children, she had applied for him, he had submitted his adjustment of status application, he was going to go ahead with his papers, his mom became gravely ill, he traveled to Mexico, he tried to come back, and they said, oh no, you have a 10-year bar. And so he said, so he left, and he came back and he said, I'm a U.S. citizen. And they said, no, you're not, and he's permanently barred. Well, isn't that a lovely story? People don't really know how vicious immigration is. And then they say, oh, well, why don't they just immigrate like my grandpappy did? Well, your grandpappy didn't get kept away from his family forever for simply saying he was a U.S. citizen. So, sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that. So the family's moved to San Diego, and he's living in Tijuana.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want pain? All right. Although it could be, losing your house would also be.
Yeah.
Having both those things happen at the same time. And that's happening actually to a lot of families. There's deportations and house loss at the same time. But by voting, people can change this system.
So we're not quite yet in a recession, are we?
Yes, we are.
No one's stating that, though.
No, but I'll bet Sherry doesn't want to say that you're in a recession because housing people don't want the bubble to burst completely. So anyway, fill this out. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We're on the questions. So sometimes, so you are definitely going to want to ask these every single question. Look the person in the eye. If they say yes, send them up to the attorneys. You know, if somehow they got, these are all questions on the red flag checklist, but if somehow the way you asked it was more compelling and they answered yes, say, oh, I'm so glad we don't help you. Please go and see the attorney. Okay. Have you ever registered to vote? And sometimes that happens. You know, it's like, oh, if you register to vote, you can get a free, you know, checking account. And they don't even, they assume that everyone is a U.S. citizen. You know, it's just like kind of dumbness. So somebody signs there, and even though it says I'm a U.S. citizen, you're not looking at what you're signing. In that kind of case, somebody can say, I really didn't know what I was doing. They can ask to have that withdrawn. But it's definitely worth finding out before you send the application in.
Which one is that? Registering?
Sorry?
Registering?
Yeah, registering to vote.
Okay.
And the other is if you ever actually voted, which is also bad. Since becoming a lawful permanent resident, this is such a backward question. Have you ever failed to file a required tax form? But the nice thing about having backward, it used to be frontward, and that made it more difficult because if somebody didn't file their taxes, they felt like they had to say yes here. Even though if you make less than $7,000 a year as a single filer, you're not required to pay your taxes. So at least this says if you're required to. So it might be something like that that might be useful to know what the single filing, you guys will know that because you do, if you know, financial stuff. To know what the amount is for a single filer that they don't have to file taxes.
We can do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
We should have kind of like some of these things maybe, you know, posted on the wall.
Yeah.
where we
Yeah,
can
like
just kind of like
little
easily
bit.
refer
Yeah,
to.
it's something I end up coming up with a lot. And then, so if somebody ever failed to file taxes, that would be bad, unless, you know, if they were required. And do you owe any taxes? Which isn't terrible. Oh, but I read something recently. We've always told people, look, if you owe taxes, just arrange to start paying them back. But then I read these minutes of a meeting with immigration where they said, oh yeah, generally, you know, if somebody's paying them back, it's okay, unless they just started to right about the time that they applied for citizenship, and then we'll see, they're just doing it manipulatively. I'm like, you're paying them back! Anyway. But, so if somebody is behind in their taxes, they should immediately make arrangements to pay their back taxes. And it could be that immigration will hold up their application until they're paid back. Okay, so do you have any title of nobility in a foreign country? Everyone says yes to that. Have you ever been declared legally incompetent? This is a really confusing one. People don't have a clue what being declared legally incompetent means, and almost no one, certainly no one that you guys are going to be serving at a citizenship fair has been declared legally incompetent or confined to a mental institution. That is involuntary confinement in a mental institution, which is also extremely rare.
Will they even admit it?
Yes. And I don't think that's one of the things that the Immigration Service goes deep into their records about either. I don't even know why it's a question in there. It used to go to the question of whether you had the capacity to understand the oath, I think, and it just stuck there. So, affiliations. Have you ever been a member of anything? Everyone says no. And I say, the PTA, you know, a union, your church, or anything like that. Mostly people just sort of want to lie low and say nothing on all this. If they have a good moral character issue, it's good to say all the good things that they're a member of their PTA or their religious institution or something like that. And it's also outside of the U.S., so this is forever. Have you ever been any group of any kind? But most people say no. Have you ever been a member of or in any way associated with the Communist Party, any other totalitarian party, or a terrorist organization? And you really love asking the little old ladies this. Have you ever advocated the overthrow of any government by force or violence, which is also another amusing one? Have you ever persecuted others? And see, this is a difficult legal issue, what persecution means. So you want to translate it for somebody into simple language, like, have you ever harmed anybody because of their beliefs? And then they look at you like, well, yeah, my little sister was really annoying me. So basically, it means, were you in the government, and did you, like, bring the force of government down on somebody because of their political beliefs, is a way you could probably translate that. This is the best one. Between March 23rd, 1933 and May 8th, 1945, did you work for or associate in any way with the Nazi government of Germany? So you're asking this is somebody who's born in 1973, so chances are very slim. Or any German or Nazi party. So obviously, everyone answers no to these questions, including former Nazis. So, continuous residence. Now we're into something that's a little more relevant to our client. Have you ever, this is really dangerous. Have you ever called yourself a non-resident on a federal, state, or local tax return? I guess I get a lot of abandonment of residence people, so I had somebody come in who had filed as a non-resident because he didn't want to pay as many taxes. And there's actually something in the immigration regulations that said, deport that person because they just claimed that they are not residing in the United States when they're a permanent resident. So they just admitted that they've abandoned their residence. Yes, so that was a mistake on his part. Or have you ever failed to file your taxes because you considered yourself a non-resident? And if you mark that yes, you're deportable on the grounds of stupidity. Okay, good moral character. Here's another one, number D15. Have you ever committed a crime or offense for which you are not arrested? Another one, which if you answer yes, you're there's the grounds of stupidity. But actually, with our U visas, we've been finding people who did do things. They had a shoplifting, they were caught by a store clerk, they weren't arrested, but they had to pay restitution to the store and things like that. So I think that if there is something like that, just go ahead and send them to the attorney. A lot of attorneys will say, you know, how do you know it was a crime? You know, you're not a criminal attorney. How can you say that you should have been arrested for that crime? So generally, people are going to say no here. In fact, the person who used to be the head of naturalization in the San Francisco USCIS office said, this is just if you want to get something off your chest. Okay. But number 16, have you ever been arrested, cited, detained by any law enforcement officer anywhere, including immigration, and I love that they say INS, former INS, for any reason? So were you questioned about a murder that happened down the street? Or were you in a car where other people were questioned? Whether you were arrested or not, were you taken aside and questioned? You have to be forthcoming about that. And then you explain it. So then you say yes, and up here it says if you answer yes to any of the following questions, you have to attach a sheet, and you guys have to write that. Although probably you want to send them up to the attorney to write it. Same thing, name, a number, yes answer to question blank, and then write it in such a way that both seems humble and contrite, but at the same time doesn't admit fault for something they haven't been convicted of. So yeah, send those to the attorney. Have you ever been charged with committing a crime or offense? So somebody gets arrested, that doesn't mean they're charged. They go to jail, and within 72 hours, the district attorney has to decide whether to bring charges. So that's a charge. So it means they're being prosecuted. Have you ever been convicted? Have you ever been placed in alternative sentencing? So what that means is, like, what's the proposition for drugs now? 136 or something like that. Anyway, so there's alternative sentencing. So you're arrested for a drug crime, you're not put in jail, instead you're given community service or rehabilitation. You should say yes there, that you were in a alternative sentencing or rehabilitation program. Have you ever received a suspended sentence or been placed on probation or parole? Suspended sentence is the same sort of thing. You have a sentence, but it's suspended if you don't violate the terms of your probation or parole. Have you ever been in jail or prison? Most people, it's just no, 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 no. Then, if it's yes, in addition to doing the separate page, you also say why you were charged, why you were arrested, the date you were arrested, where were you, and what happened. So, I was pulled over for suspicion of drunk driving on January 1st, 1999 in San Francisco. Outcome, I took a breathalyzer and passed. Okay. So number 22 is all about morality. So have you ever been a habitual drunkard? No one I have ever filled this out for has ever said yes. This is like a total throwback to the 40s. No one, people may be, but they aren't going to say it. Okay. Have you ever been a prostitute or procured anyone for prostitution? Which is very interesting because procuring someone for prostitution is not a ground of inadmissibility. Being a prostitute is a ground of inadmissibility. So being a John, yeah. And it's not a crime involving moral turpitude either. So whatever. Although that will be a discretionary factor. I think most immigration examiners will hold it against somebody if they've got a conviction for being a John. I'm sorry, a John means that somebody who hired a prostitute. A little arcane knowledge there.
A working prostitute.
Yes. So, sold or smuggled controlled substances, that's very bad. That will, sold or controlled substances. Okay, alien smuggling, selling drugs, false claim of U.S. citizenship, those are the things that no one imagines what the incredible, shocking immigration consequences are, which is basically you're not going to immigrate. So that's kind of sleeper in there, stuff in there. Have you been married to more than one person at the same time? Which is really bad because this is not the ground of inadmissibility. The ground of inadmissibility is did you enter the United States for reasons of polygamy? Bigamy is not a crime. It means one of your marriages is invalid, but it's not a crime. So we always fight them really hard when they finally get something. So we always win. Have you ever helped to enter anyone? Helped anyone enter the United States illegally? We all know that a yes answer to this would be a bad thing. Have you ever gambled? Have you ever failed to support your children? Number 23, have you ever given false or misleading information to any U.S. official? So that person who had lied on her SAW application and then lied about it on her adjustment of status application, she should say yes here, which means really a lot of sense. Although the bar is only 5 years, but it's also in there. So, have you ever lied to any U.S. government official to gain entry or admission to the United States? Basically the same thing. Okay. E, are you in removal proceedings? Have you ever been in removal proceedings? If somebody says yes here, they get sent upstairs. Military service, the difficult one here is selective service registration, because a lot of men don't know that between the ages of 18 and 25, they must register for the selective service. They're required to register, give their name, their whereabouts to the selective service.
Whether you're an alien or whatever.
Well, technically, yes. Whatever. So, what they say here is, are you a male who lived in the United States at any time between your 18th and 26th birthday in any status except as a lawful non-immigrant? A non-immigrant is a student, a tourist, a business traveler, an athlete or something like that, who doesn't intend to immigrate to the United States. But this leaves open undocumented. So technically, an undocumented person is supposed to try to register, and then their registration gets bounced because they don't have status. So, but technically they are nevertheless supposed to do it. The thing is that they don't learn that they're required to do it until they get their green card. And it used to be that even when people got their green card, they didn't understand that they were supposed to register for the draft. And so they'd say, nobody ever told me. And at least here in San Francisco, they'd say, we believe you. And now they're a lot more aggressive about saying, you must register for the Selective Service. So now they don't believe you if you say you didn't know.
So you mean you're actually supposed to register still?
Only men. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Right. Yeah, my son coming up. Isn't that amazing?
Well,
We have an all-volunteer army, but they want to be sure that,
yeah, because right now they're claiming that we don't have enough men out there. So.
But there's no draft. Right. Because if there were a draft, they'd have people in the streets and the war would have to stop. And there would be an upheaval, there would be a social upheaval in sex and drugs. So that's the 60s. Yes. So, if somebody didn't register and they were supposed to, so they were a permanent resident and they got it when they were 24, they didn't register, they have bad moral character. So, they have to write an explanation and say, I didn't register, I should have, I didn't know I was supposed to, I know that's not an excuse, I really didn't know. And it's always also good to write, in fact, maybe Leila can put this up on a banner. Had I known I was supposed to, I would have, because I obey all the laws. I hope the Immigration Service is going to see this explanation. So you do want to say something like that. I didn't know. Had I known, I would have done it.
So what about the young men who get citizenship automatically when they've been
Killed in battle?
Yeah. And also, served in the army or
right, yeah.
wherever.
Yeah.
They automatically get citizenship. Don't they?
If they're permanent residents, some of them, but there has to be a special act to do it. I think that the military, I think a lot of people wish that you could grant permanent residence or citizenship to undocumented people who join and fight, but I think the political stickiness of that it's too great. It's okay to recruit undocumented people to die in the desert and work in factories at below minimum wage. It's not okay to specifically recruit them to die in the desert or Iraq. Right.
I'm actually surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if someday you don't have that. But, so, the magical thing here is you only have to show good moral character for 5 years. So this person had bad moral character, and he continued to have bad moral character until he was 26 years old. Because any day up until he was 26, he could have registered and he didn't. So he was bad, 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 bad. So 5 years after he was 26, that is on his